Chapter 8, Friedrich. Wanienyekevu was excited to meet someone knowledgeable about history, and spoke with confidence, saying, "One of my ancestor was Irish and many looking for work served as overseers during slavery. Some were kind and gentle and some were not. But my ancestor left that entire market during what they have called, the Devil's Punch Bowl. Where 20,000 black men during the Civil War were murdered in a mass grave, a horrendous crime they tried to hide from history." Friedrich shook his head. "Yes, even as you speak I'm reminded that even after the Civil War, most horse trainers, grooms, and jockeys were our people in a sport, back then, called the Kentucky Derby. In fact, of the 28 winning jockeys of the first Kentucky Derby, 15 of them were our people. However, we were banned from the sport, once the Jim Crow era began. But about 80 years later, we produced men like Marlon St. Julian, Kevin Krieger, and Oliver Lewis. Old Oliver Lewis was born into slavery but won first place in the inaugural Kentucky Derby of 1875. There was a young man." Friedrich paused. "Damn, his name is at the tip of my tongue. Soup, that was his name." At 15, James "Soup" Perkins became one of the youngest jockeys to win the Kentucky Derby, and another man, Isaac Burns Murphy, was known as one of the best jockeys to ever race. Yes, we all heard of Meghan Markle, but she was not the first black woman to become a member of the British royal family, as if it matters, but Queen Sophie Charlotte, the wife of King George III, was. Wanienyekevu, smiling in agreement, "Yes, I have heard of those, but did you know that during slavery, there were a series of revolts and rebellions by slaves against their masters? In Britain, they ended the British slave trade in 1807, through Parliament, but it wasn't the end of slavery itself. It wasn't a provision to free those who were already enslaved. At the same time, slavery persisted, especially in the Caribbean. The act only made the buying and selling slaves from British ships illegal. However, the slaves in Barbados thought it freed them, but they weren't, causing the Barbados Revolt of 1816. Wanienyekevu smiled. "I never been to Africa or any place other than Louisiana, until now, so I speak about my history and what comes close to home, and I see that you on an international level, and that's different for me. I might know it, but it sounds different from someone who more." Friedrich politely interrupted Wanienyekevu. "That's precisely it, because I never heard of this Devil's Punch Bowl. African history is, as you say, hit closely to home than American slavery." Wanienyekevu smiled. "That makes sense. Well, we can definitely learn what's missing in both of our understanding of them both." Friedrich shook his head. "Yes, we can. Please continue." Wanienyekevu smiled. "Okay, well, it was rare for our people to have control over an enormous amount of land. However, Reverend Isaac Simmons, from Amite County, Mississippi, owned over 270 acres of debt-free land. His family worked the land, produced crops, and sold the wood off the land. A rumor was started that there was oil on his land, and a group of white men showed up on Simmons' land and warned him to stop cutting lumber. Knowing what was about to happen, Mr. Simmons consulted with a lawyer, a man who practices law, to work out the dispute and ensure that the property would belong to his children in the event of his death. Later, the men kidnapped and shot Simmons 3 times, cut out his tongue, and gave the rest of the family 10 days to get off the land. Like always, an all-white jury acquitted them, and they successfully stole his land." Friedrich paused. "But it's especially sad when your own people, whether or not flesh and blood, betray you. That's something that cuts worse than a knife can ever do. Whether for money, power, or position, it doesn't matter. Selling out your own is the worst kind of betrayal, and justice must be taken to heal that pain to bring about peace, and these demons are doing far worse than we as a people have ever encountered. I've seen what they were doing to our people, and it is excruciating to see the cruelty." Wanienyekevu said. "I like you, a man after my own heart, who loves Sabaoth and knows a little about history." Friedrich smiled. "A little? John Brown, the man mentioned in Frederick Douglass' letter to Harriet Tubman, a name almost unknown to most Americans, although he was the frontrunner of some of the most important moments in the 19th century. Brown's name was lost to history until 2020 when there was a mini-series about him named The Good Lord Bird, but it did him just a little justice, for they showed him as a crazy man, a Bible fanatic. Like you have to be crazy to see the injustice of a race of people. Let me tell you, his ties to slavery not only led him into nonviolent resistance but to active, violent terrorism, which would cause many deaths and lead up to the Civil War. At 12, Brown recalls watching a black boy being beaten by a man with an iron shovel right in front of him. An everyday incident in America profoundly affected Brown's attitude toward slavery throughout his entire life. As he grew up and had a family, he always kept his disgust with slavery, but it had to take a tragedy to put his wheels in motion. Elijah Parrish Lovejoy was also an outspoken opponent of slavery, which his community met with intense hostility. He was sent death threats, his offices were attacked, and eventually, he was gunned down and killed. The slaying of Lovejoy disgusted John Brown, and he vowed to work for the rest of his life to carry on Lovejoy's work and oversee the abolition of slavery. A difficult task for Brown because he was broke and, on top of that, had health problems that had plagued his family. Yet, he would not give up and made his way to Boston to join the anti-slavery crusade. Brown and his family arrived in Boston when the city was transforming into a central hub of anti-slavery activity. Mind you, Boston was one place that dealt with and was famous for slave farms. Wanyenyekevu said. Yes, I'm aware of that, and it produced the word motherfucker from that event, for slaves were forced to have sex with their children to produce better so-called stock like they do with bulls and horses. Friedrich said. We will have to talk in depth on that, I didn't know all that. I knew about the slave farm, but didn't know that part. He shook his head with disappointment, damn. Anyway, Brown immediately threw himself into the organization and became a crucial figure in the running of the famous Underground Railroad. The government deemed the Underground Railroad deeply subversive. It led to the establishment of the Fugitive Slave Act, which permitted bounty hunters to capture slaves and return them to their so-called masters, and some were, well, you know. In response, Brown turned away from nonviolent action and established a vigilante group known as the League of Gileadites to protect slaves from being captured. While Brown's activities were primarily nonviolent, at first, this changed when pro-slavery forces invaded Kansas, where his sons lived. The violence during this period was the intense, but brutal beating of the anti-slavery Senator Charles Sumner. Brown was not forgiving and retaliated. Brown and his comrades murdered 5 of the men 2 days after the beating, which caused brutal violence. During this, one of his sons was killed. After seeing the death of his son, it is not clear how many pro-slavery men were killed by Brown, but his willingness to use violence spread throughout the United States, for some hailed him as a hero and others as a dangerous terrorist. Over the next few years, Brown's violent activities would escalate. He gathered a force of 22 vigilantes and attacked Harper's Ferry, which contained an armory. The tension of the vigilante group was to seize the weapons and spark a revolution that would lead to the abolition of slavery by force. However, the U.S. Marines attacked the vigilantes, and many of Brown's allies and 2 more of his sons were killed. Brown refused to surrender, saying he would rather die than give up to the soldiers. He was knocked unconscious, arrested, and sent to prison. They charged and sentenced him to death. The court held him in total contempt, saying, Wanyenyekevu interrupted Friedrich, had I so interfered with the rich, the powerful, the intelligent, the great or on behalf of any of their friends, it would have been all right, and every man would have thought it worthy of reward rather than punishment. Wanyenyekevu continued, they hung him to death in Virginia. He was 59. After his death, the Civil War broke out in the United States, leading to the abolition of slavery. Yes, I have definitely heard of John Brown, but I didn't know all that. Okay then, according to my belief and knowledge, Africans are the first humans on Earth. Many have heard it but do not believe it to be true. Because our history was altered, they and others have been feeding everyone lies. The oldest human remains found by archaeologists is that of a Negro, brown or black person, whatever you want to call us. It helps prove the Fact that Africans created civilization and that various African tribes inhabited regions outside of Mother Africa. Just the other day I was doing some research on one such group, the Twa tribe of Africa, who were the first people to live in Ireland. They were also referred to as Akan by other African tribes and the well-known word leprechaun by the Europeans. Leprechaun comes from the Old Irish word, lucarpan, a compound name composed of lu, meaning small, and corp, meaning body. They venerated the Great Black Mother and had women as leaders of their tribe. There have been many tales talked about leprechauns and their magical powers. Many people believe them to be a fairy tale, but in reality, they existed. The Twas were small men and women who grew to about 4 foot 11 inches. They were skilled craftsmen who migrated from Africa to Ireland thousands of years ago and had advanced knowledge of medicine, metallurgy, textile, and clothing. Manufacturing. Excellent shoemaking, which the Caucasians at that time in human existence thought was magical. Various authorities have confirmed the presence of the Twa people in history and archaeology. British Egyptologists Gerald Massey, Albert Churchward, and the Scottish historian David Mac Ritchie, as well as the British antiquarian Godfrey Higgins have researched this topic, and they have shed light on the Twa people. Using names such as black as Ethiopians, cum nigris gentibus, nimble-footed blackamoors to describe them. But the Partholans, Fomorians, Nems, Firbolgs, Tuatha De Danann, Milesians of Ireland, and the Picts of northern Scotland were all blacks. Historians describe them as dwarfs, dark elves, or leprechauns in Irish history. There's even a book by Davide Mac Ritchie entitled Ancient and Modern Britons, which stated that the wild tribes of Ireland were black men is hinted at by the fact that a wild Irishman is in Gaelic a black Irishman or dub Arianac. The word dub in Gaelic is black. Like in many parts of the world, there are accounts of Europeans committing, eliminating, or going to war with African tribes throughout history. Entire tribes have been wiped out throughout human history, and they are one of them. Many believe that the Irish celebration of St. Patrick was the hunting down of the Twa people. The reason for the Irish holiday is a poem that's said to reveal a hidden meaning, a moral or political one at that. According to the Irish, back in the 5th century, St. Patrick exterminated Ireland's snakes by driving them all into the sea. The Irish and Christians make it sound like he saved the Caucasian people from real deadly snakes, but that is false. No evidence points to the existence of snakes, even being in Ireland. Ireland never had snakes. There are no snakes in Iceland, Hawaii, New Zealand, Greenland, or Antarctica for the same reasons. You see, Ireland was once connected to a large landmass during the Ice Age, and the land was far too cold for any cold-blooded reptiles to survive. Ireland became colder when the glaciers melted thousands of years ago, pouring more cold water between Ireland and its neighbors. Other animals, like wild boars, lynx, and brown bears, made it across. Also, only a single reptile, the common lizard, was able to make it. Snakes, however, missed their chance to survive in Ireland. So, there was no way St. Patrick could have chased snakes into the sea with his religious powers. The Twa people are the snakes he chased out and killed. The Twa people, just like many African tribes, were wise, just like the serpent. The Twa, just like many ancient African tribes, were also referred to as Naga, Nagar, and Negus, which loosely means serpent people or people of the serpent. Friedrich nodded his head. I knew about the first part, but didn't know about the last part about the snakes. It makes sense that the uraeus or serpent crown on Egyptian and Nubian royalty was known as the Nagar or the Negus, symbolizing wisdom, power, and protection. African cultures and religions have long used the serpent to represent eternal life, regeneration, power, protection, and wisdom. Wanyanyekavu nodded. It is fitting that the allegory of serpents clearly points to the Twa people. It's safe to say that St. Patrick was mostly a warlord and celebrated his role in eliminating and chasing the Twa into the sea, where they met their death. Everyone knows black people ruled Russia and Europe during the Dark Ages. Friedrich smiled. That fits as well. They called it the Dark Ages. Wanyanyekevu smiled. You sound like me, and I'm interested to know more about you, and how you came to this part of the country, all the way from south. Excuse me, Azania? Friedrich paused. You can say South Africa or Azania. We have our history here as well. Apartheid was a well-known fact, and we have our heroes and legends like Steve Biko, Shaka Zulu, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, Nkosi Johnson, Thabo Mbeki, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and of course, Winnie and Nelson Mandela. Our history is not much different from here. Anyway, from North America, my ancestor Eddie Jerome Updike was a powerful warrior for Sabaoth, and my great-ancestor, his mother, Akelamelech, said this to keep us on track. Wanyanyekevu interrupted him. Hold on, I heard that name quite a few times since I've been on this journey. She's your ancestor? Friedrich, with a smile, yes, a noble woman in her time, she said. They may steal my crown, but they will never steal my glory. Those words are written in my DNA. I will rise. Friedrich paused. She served Sabaoth and brought many to knowledge and wisdom, and many of her descendants and followers kept the faith to the present day. She, too, kept the faith, and I did too until my father died, and I became one of the most infamous murderers of all time. I killed the men who murdered my father and anyone who spoke down on my people, no matter their color, race, creed, or gender. I was an angry militant drunk. Hell, if they talked badly about our women, dead. Traveled the world, killing racist people. When I was about your age, I was on my way to Israel to kill some of those fake-ass Jews, but I had to pass the old ruins of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, which claimed to possess the Ark of the Covenant, or Tablet, in Aksum, where I met a man who later. Wanyanyekevu interrupted. Mletsi. Friedrich said, but of course, Mletsi. That was 15 years ago, and I have the gift of the Shekinah glory. Only enlightened people see it. I just glow like a bright light to them and I can charge you back up when you're weak and down with a touch. That's my gift, a spiritual battery charger. Oh, and evil cannot come near at all. It burns them to come at least 50 yards. I can feel their spirit burning, like a tingling sensation. Wanyanyekevu was excited about hearing Friedrich's story. But how did you get here? And in jail, on top of that. Friedrich laughed. That's a long story, but it involves that man that was just arrested. While here, I found that book in my cell, and I just started reading it to help the time pass. When I got to that part that you heard me reading, I heard Mletsi say, meet Frederick Douglass, Harriet, and you came to my cell. Wanyanyekevu shook his head. Well then, come meet the rest of us. Friedrich said, the 12, right? Well, 11, I guess, I make 12. I was supposed to meet 11 more people who were Sabaoth's chosen warriors to lead the way. They entered the room where Jom and the rest of the warriors were eating. Before Wanyanyekevu could introduce Friedrich to them, the stone's prophet Z gave them began to shine. Elisha and Elijah said, the man with the glow. Friedrich smiled, saying, that's 11, including myself. Where is number 12? Just then, Queen walked in. There she goes, number 12. Queen, confused, asks, what is he talking about? Queen shook her head. Never mind, we need Yule in this meeting, but I'll tell them Yule are still eating. Wanyanyekevu shook his head. No, we'll come now and eat later. Walking alongside Queen, the warriors were tired, and Friedrich said to Wanyanyekevu, take care of your people and serve Sabaoth with all your heart, and he shall bless you. Wanyanyekevu said, I have done that, haven't I? Everyone shook their heads. Yes. Friedrich then said, everyone except one. Wanyanyekevu stopped. Who? Friedrich smiled. Everyone except yourself. Rest, and build up what you have gotten so far, because a war is coming, and you must be prepared. Love is a mighty thing. He looked over at Queen as he continued. Sabaoth wants you to find love and make yourself complete. Then he looked at Queen again, and they continued to walk toward the meeting. Wanyanyekvu thought about what Friedrich said, but as soon as they entered the meeting room, Dark Eagle said, Wanyanyekvu, we are still determining how to divide the land. We don't see how to organize the people, nor the land. Wanyanyekvu thought for a minute and said as Dark Eagle projected a map on the wall, we are now in possession of land from Picacho Peak State Park to Tucson, from Tucson to the Watchtower, from the Watchtower to Madden at Altonware, and from Madden at Altonware to Colonia Anahuac, but Abenians still surround us. Phoenix, to the north of us, El Paso, Texas, to the east, and the Isles of Californias to the west. I advise we encase ourselves with the military. The warriors and their families, then the civilians. We must be structured to keep order and peace, and I must check all that live here and search their hearts. A huge task. But it must be done. We cannot live in peace when evil is in our midst. It will take some time, but it's time that I settle down and do the will of Sabaoth because a great war is coming, and all must be enlightened. All will not be warriors, but all will be enlightened. Sabaoth knows what we need, and he shall supply our needs. Once the enlightenment is finished, we will have all we need. Studying the map, a while longer, he continued, Friedrich will be our adjudicator, and the rest of the warriors will have their army. Friedrich turned to Wanyanyekvu, may I add, at first, this was Sabaoth's world, but the day that this planet rejected him and was about to be destroyed was when it became Satan's turn to rule this planet. Satan was trying to control it from the beginning, but now, it's Satan's world because the evil hearts of men. Sabaoth has allowed Satan to control it while Sabaoth gathers his people. We will hear him bark, meaning we will have a few battles here and there, but he is still chained up and cannot harm us until he is released from his chains. Think not, he doesn't know what you have done because he does, but one day, he will get loose. So, clear the evil-hearted men from among us, regardless of race, color, or religion. I don't care if it's your mother. An evil-hearted person must not live within your walls or know what you are doing, lest Satan creeps in and takes all you have, even your soul. For we are what we've done in this life, and what has been done to us created us. So, that is what he will use against us. Therefore, we must seek enlightenment and let Sabaoth use us as he pleases. Friedrich paused. Mletzi visited me, and he said that Sabaoth will stir in the waters of the Gulf and the Atlantic as in a great pot, and his fist will go through the bottom of the earth and will send a slow flood, and many cities will be underwater, and some will disappear forever. We will be in many, many battles, but after this event and the lands become dry, a great battle shall come, and we must send all who cannot fight to the home of the south until the battle is over. Friedrich held his head down. I would rather die for Sabaoth than die for myself. And the people heard his words and repeated them. I would rather die for Sabaoth than die for myself. Friedrich continued, we must pray the prayer of Sabaoth when we go into these battles. My alliance is with heaven, where dwell those who reside in the holy high realms. It is to them I commit this battle, and they will fight for me. Selah. Friedrich then shouted, Yusisahau. They looked at Friedrich and he smiled, it means, never forget. They all shout, Yusisahau. For hours, Dark Eagle and his family, alongside Wanyanyekvu and the warriors, stayed up all night organizing their plans and deciding what to do and how to do it. After the meeting, everyone was tired, but they all agreed with this new plan. Wanyanyekvu walked into his room and stared at the candles as he sat on the corner of his bed. Thoughts rushed through his mind. He grabbed his notepad and wrote, Lost and Found. Looking for the lost and found, to see if I need to recover a couple of things. Took 2 people along with me, to help me see. We walk up an escalator, then took some zigzagging steps, followed by some sliding hallways. At the end of the hallways was a sign. Lost and Found. I saw a young lady I haven't seen in 21 years. Why didn't you come through the side doors? You're messing up my floors. I replied, all these years, you still yelling, fussing, and cursing. as I rushed to go toward the back. The sight of her brought back pain, betrayal, and tears. On my way there, I see someone I hadn't seen in 15 years. A rude bastard, who was mean. I asked, "Why are you still mad?" He replied, "Oh, you're bad." Confused look on my face, as he rushed to get a gat. Started shooting up the place. I felt disgrace. Told my friends, who were with me then, "Let's get out of this place." "But I thought you wanted to find something you lost," one said. I replied with a smile. "I just realized, I didn't lose anything, I dropped those things on purpose. Because they hindered my life. As crazy as it sounds. I lost them, so I could be found." He wrote, "Oh me, oh my. Oh me, oh my," was the cry of an old man I once knew. He prayed to the Father about his blessings, his trials, that he endured during his lifetime. 80 years in the world, some good and of course, some bad. Many sad. "Oh me, oh my," was his reply. Remembering the days, frustrations in life. But at all times he had a smile, etched upon his face. Now, as I listen to him pray, having that conversation with his Maker. Thinking he's going to leave soon, one day. Oh me, oh my. I sigh. To think about him. What happened to him? It seemed like it was just the other day, a stroke rushed across his heart. Lost one of his legs. Now, praying today. I sit in his house, seeing the grandkids playing. His accomplishments are great and many years have passed. Hoping one day, I can say, before I die. Oh me, oh my. He flipped the page over and wrote, "Black Harmony." Black harmony is a thing of the past. Some might say, and even see, and I do agree. But how can I stop this thing that goes on, in this day and age? There's no unity, like in the days of slavery. When many, can't say all, united into black harmony. Black artists, black business, black corporations grew stronger and stronger. But black on black crime fills the air. Foolishness, selfishness, drugs and alcohol, seems to be our God. But I know, that's a lie. All I can do, so it seems, is just cry. But my eyes have no more tears. Nothing but fear, awaiting black harmony. He wrote, "Lust." What is lust? An intense longing, desire, or need. A craving that many will fulfill at any expense, no matter who it may affect. Selfishness. Is it only sexual? Hell no, that's lasciviousness. You can lust after anything that's conceived. And lust, when it's conceived, brings forth sin. Sin, when it is finished, brings forth death. That's a fact, not fiction. Lust for money was my lust, until I had a dream. Remembering the wisdom of Solomon, the courage of Elijah. Then I remembered, that dream. My heart was, some would say, callous, at that time. The day I laid my head down. I was in this room with a ladder, that went upward toward a light. Started climbing this ladder and people started to fall. There were old women and old men climbing slowly, but I was in a hurry, to get to the top. So, I started going up the ladder, with no concern about the others. Trying to get to the top, people started to fall, I didn't care at all. Then as I went up, the younger the people got. But hell. I was scared, just wanted to get there to the top. Non-stop. The light got brighter, I got higher. I got older. Many were falling as my selfishness got stronger. Realized the top had no end. It was too late. I had no family, I had no friends. Driven by lust, and died in my sins. Last he wrote, I be me. I be me. Now, they say me dread, grow too long. Yes, gone too far. But me gotta learn just a few mo things, 'bout me dreads on me head. Patience, they have shown me. Wisdom is what I thirst, me dreads on the head, are so important to me, and only me. 'Cause, I did all things to be someone else. Me dreads, help me to be me. Used ta dress to impress, now, I dress for me own success. Is that, okay? Can I be me? Seein'. For none else will I try to be. I don't really talk like this. But me try to understand all me fellow man. 'Cause me been a lot of places, met a lot of races, a lot of faces. I read a lot of books, 'bout me Lord. He showed me. Remain low. Humble to dis mess, that cause many to be stressed. Yeah. I look in the mirror, a humble man of God. So, I try. Trying to go far for I trust in only Jah. No, not a Christian. According to the new standards. No Muslim, no Rasta, I be. I be me.